Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our presentation of Putting UX into Customer Service. I'm Jamie Machik with the Nicolet Federated Library System in Green Bay, and I'm happy all of you are here to join us for this presentation by Talia Richards, and she is the Marketing and Social Media Manager with Springshare. And Springshare is the maker of LibGuides, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of them. And she has been with them for 5 years and is responsible for all of the marketing and social media outreach. She currently lives in New York City and has her MLIS from the University of Rhode Island and an MCOM in Information Systems and Operations Management from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Talia also spent 5.5 years at the Johnson and Wales Library in Providence as a circulation manager, reference librarian, student coordinator, and a digital services librarian. I saw Talia speak at the Computers and Libraries Conference back in April and just loved what she had to say, loved her energy and presentation style, and I thought all of you would enjoy hearing from her as well. So Talia, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Jamie, and hi, everybody. So welcome to my presentation, Putting UX into Customer Service. And let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I like to say is that I am not a UX expert, nor is anyone at Springshare a UX expert. So if you're thinking about, oh, I wonder, are they speaking from expertise? No, we're all kind of amateur UX. I have experts in quotes in that regard. So just a quick disclaimer about that. Now, really quickly, who is Springshare? So we are a virtual company, and we lovingly call ourselves and each other Springies. And we develop web-based applications specifically for libraries, but also for education institutions, which is directly connected to with our mission there. So a little bit about our support team. We handle these three main pillars on our support team. Roughly 2,000 emails a month, and that's through dedicated support shifts Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. So we roughly handle about 500 emails in a traditional 5-day work week. Last year alone, we handled 26,000 emails in 2014. For training, we do about 20 plus based webinars each month. These also occur Monday through Fridays. We record them. We make them available online. We also do webinars for our overseas users. So frequently I'm online at like 9 o'clock at night doing webinars for Australia and Singapore. And we also have our biannual virtual user conference called Springy Camp, which is actually next week. And then lastly, we provide all of our help documentation. We build help guides and FAQs and things like that. Now, if this kind of sounds a little bit familiar, it's because we are the reference librarians to librarians. So this is very kind of similar to what a reference department would do in a library. Answer questions, do instruction, and provide, help documentation. And by the way, all of this is done by about a dozen dedicated team members. So the following are my 8 Springshare principles of putting UX or thinking about the user experience in your customer service. If you're not familiar with Springshare, one of the things that we are frequently, that is frequently said about us is that our customer service is extremely good. So this is kind of an unwritten manual of those principles that have kind of been cultivated since Springshare began. Now, as I mentioned, this is not written down anywhere. This is not a manual. This isn't a policy. This isn't kind of handed out to new employees as like a Bible that they must study and learn. It is just basic principles that kind of form the foundation of Springshare. And something to note is that these principles are not standalone principles. They are all interlocking and overlapping. So you're going to notice a lot of repeated kind of concepts occurring over and over again. All right, so my first principle is to be strategic. This is a quote from Smashing Magazine, and it says, The user experience is strategic. It begins with an idea to improve the lives of users and continues through every moment of the customer lifecycle. It is driven by a vision that guides and justifies every decision. So how is Springshare strategic about UX in our customer service? For us, it starts at the top. This is Slaven Zivkovic. This is our CEO, Chief Springy. You are more than welcome to email him directly. We have a high degree of transparency here at Springshare, such that when Slaven is interacting with users, he frequently CCs the entire company on his interactions with users, as well as forwarding those interactions to the entire company. Another part of the Be Strategic is that a lot of Springshare people have a high HQ. Now, HQ stands for Hospitality Quotient, and I wouldn't say that Slaven has specifically hired for this trait, and it's not like we all sat down and took a test, but HQ, or Hospitality Quotient, really applies when people take pleasure in providing excellent customer service. Not that they like doing it or that they are good at it, but that they actually get personal gratification and pleasure from providing excellent hospitality. Our method of UX and being strategic about it is that it is a consistently and daily reinforced value. It's a customer-first mentality, started by Slaven, and it is reinforced daily. And a bit about how it's reinforced daily is that everyone in the entire company does support in one way or another. This would be similar to everybody in your library doing reference or everybody in your library doing customer service. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now, here are some industry leaders that are really, really well known for their customer service. I wouldn't say that we model ourselves directly after them, but when I was doing research, I noticed some really interesting traits and similarities between what we do and kind of what they do. So over on the left is Craig Newmark. He is the founder and CEO of Craigslist, probably something that you all utilize maybe quite frequently. And while he is founder and CEO, and he coded it up and he built Craigslist that is now in almost every major city across the whole country, if you were to look at Craig's business card, it would say customer service representative, because that's what he does at Craigslist. He is a customer service representative. At Amazon.com, every single person in the entire company, no matter where you are or who you are, even Jeff Bezos himself, works at a call center for 1 week every year. Probably also heard about this with Southwest. They have a similar concept as well. Kayak.com does something really incredible, and I love this. They have this thing called a red phone. And it's not literally a red phone, but basically it randomly selects any customer service interaction from the day before, and it emails it out to every single person in the company. This creates a really high level of transparency because at any given point in time, my interaction with a client could be seen by every single person in the company. So it creates high levels of transparency, which of course promote accountability. So here are some recommended tips for you when you're thinking about how to employ UX, strong UX in customer service, and being strategic about it. So asking yourself, what is your value statement? And where does customer service really fit into your value statement? And what can you do at your library to encourage transparency that helps to improve your customer service? All right, let's talk about my second principle here, which is about going the extra mile. This is a quote from Roger Staubach. Actually, I think it's Staubach or Staubo. You know what? I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I'm sure someone will tell me in the chat box. But Roger, we'll just go by his first name. Roger said that there are no traffic jams along the extra mile. So this is an absolutely fascinating study. Forbes reported on a study that was done by TinyPulse. TinyPulse is an employee engagement firm, and they polled 200,000 employees across 500 organizations around the whole world. And they asked them this one question: What motivates you to go the extra mile at your organization? And they gave them a bunch of options on a checklist. Of course, they thought maybe money, maybe benefits, maybe maternity leave or paternity leave or more vacation time. They thought all of those would rank, near the top. But in fact, peer and camaraderie were the number one motivators for colleagues and employees to go the extra mile. So here's something we do at Springshare that was started way back in 2012. So Slaven, our chief Springy, sent the whole company this email. And he said, every day I challenge you, when you get a kudos from a customer, from a client, forward it to the whole entire company. And let's do this for every single day for just 1 year. Let's try and get one kudos every day for a year. It is now 3 years later, and we still do this. So what is the benefit of kind of creating this shared daily kudos? The first thing it does is it builds a feeling of family. We are all championing for each other. And when you think about, there's that old saying where hospitality starts at home, hospitality starts at home. That's the same concept of UX starts at home. So we are really providing great support for each other, and it really builds a feeling of family. It's also a positive reinforcement. There is literally nothing better than getting a good job from people that you respect and admire on a day-to-day basis. It also provides a learning experience with regards to language. If one of my colleagues gets an incredible kudos from a customer, and I notice a particular language or sentence or phrasing that they utilize, I'm going to adapt my language to utilize that language, to utilize what they wrote, so that I can provide better customer service for the next person who asks a similar question. And lastly, it focuses on the warm and fuzzies. It gets really easy to stand around the water cooler and kvetch about that person that asked that question that was really annoying, and we could all have stories about those people. But it's never good to focus on the negative, and focusing on the warm and fuzzies and on the positive can act like a sugar boost at the end of a long day. When you're on your 200th email of the day, going the extra mile for the 201 can be hard, but the shared daily kudos can really help to push you to give that little bit extra. So here's an example of one of my coworkers, Val. Val really went the extra mile here. So let me give you a little bit of background. This was a client of ours that was in Sweden, and they were writing in with an issue with their LibGuide system. And it turns out it had nothing to do with LibGuides at all, but it had to do with their network connection. And it really needed to be solved by their IT folks. So she could have just ended it with that. She could have said, hey, you need to contact your IT department. There's nothing that we can do. And she would have been well within her rights to do that, but she didn't. She went the extra mile. So she got them the answer. But the best part about this is that she got them the answer in Swedish. So she knew that probably the way to provide the best possible support is to give them the answer in their own native language, and that's what she did. And what I really like about all of this is that Valentina really kind of approached this problem like Bobby Fischer sitting down at a chess game, not thinking to the next move, but thinking 10 moves ahead. How can I get the most satisfiable outcome, 10 steps from now? So here are some tips for you for going the extra mile. Now that you know that peer camaraderie is a strong motivator, how can you use that to encourage a customer service mindset in your own institutions? And thinking like Bobby Fischer, what's the next step? Anticipating the next question and answering it before they even ask. My third principle is about being empathetic. This is a really great quote from Danny Meyer. He wrote a book called Setting the Table. Bar none, this is probably the best book about the user experience that is not actually about the user experience at all. Danny Meyer is a famous restaurateur in New York City. He has restaurants like the Union Square Cafe, Shake Shack, if you're familiar with that. And so he wrote this book about setting the table because in the early 90s and the late 80s, when he first came about as a restaurateur, customer service really did not exist very well in the restaurant business. And some of the standards that you see today our kind of purported and built upon what Danny Meyer did in the 80s. So he wrote this really wonderful book, and if you're reading it, I strongly recommend that you replace the word restaurant with library and replace the word hospitality with customer service, and you can read it in that same light. So how are we empathetic here at Springshare? Well, we are you. We are our own users, is what I always tell people, and we use our own tools as you would use them. That means that we're always on the same side that you're on because we want to be happy just like you want to be happy. And as I tell people, 50% of the company is made up of librarians. So we understand the kind of situations and problems that you deal with on a day-to-day basis because we are and were librarians. So let's see some of that in depth. So first things first, we build LibGuides like you would build LibGuides. And we couldn't provide the kind of the level of service that we provide without using LibGuides and our other tools. So this is our help site, and we use LibGuides to provide help guides on our documentation to help you build your own LibGuide systems. Our 24,000 emails that I think we answered last year, we utilize LibAnswers, our own tool for answering client questions. So it is our support system, and in fact, over the summer, our 500 average tickets over the course of a week jumped to about 700 and 800 in a typical week. So we were really kind of pushing the limits of what's possible, and we use LibAnswers to do it. One of the great things about LibAnswers that we utilize is we also use it as our feature tracking system, which in your particular scenario could also be used as, requests or feedback from patrons about things they would like to see in the library. So we utilize it as our support and as a way to track features. We use our LibCal system for all of our training sessions. We also use it to track staff activity internally, which helps us to report both on a weekly and yearly basis all of our activity that we have. And for training, when we notice that certain sessions have low attendance, it helps to direct and guide future training schedules. So if we notice a particular session didn't do well last month, we're not going to offer it again next month. So it really helps to better hone and provide the best schedule for our users going forward because we want to meet their needs. We use our LibAnalytics tool to track our training session activity. So if we have a particular training session or instruction session in your case, we track how many registered, how many attended, what did we cover, how did it go, session highs, session lows, and it really helps us to provide the best webinars that we can because we're doing kind of quality control checks ongoing. And lastly, well, yes, second to last, we use LibStaffer, which is our staffing tool, and it's how we're able to staff our support team. So you can see we have, layered staffing shifts. We have certain people dedicated for certain times of the day, managing certain things, and it allows us to swap shifts with one another and figure out the total number of hours that we have on our support schedule. And lastly, we use our LibSurveys tool to gather feedback from attendees in real time. Now, another thing that we do about this is that everybody can see the feedback of all the other attendees. So I can see the feedback of any of my fellow trainers. And so once again, if I notice that my colleague Greg got really, really wonderful feedback for a training session that he did, I might have a chat with him and say, hey, how did you convey this bit of information, or how did you really reach them when you talked about that? Because his feedback, positive or negative, is going to directly inform how I teach that same class. Another thing that we do, mostly because we're an entirely virtual company, is that we can't really see people's faces and find out how they're feeling when they have a question. When they come to us, are they excited, confused, really, really angry, or in a full panic tailspin? So we ask them, This is our contact us form for our support, and we ask how they're feeling as one of the form questions. And how they're feeling directly impacts how we're going to respond to that question. So if somebody is, zen, my language and my interaction with them is going to be totally different than if somebody indicated that they were worried or panicked or angry. In addition, anybody who selects worried or panicked or angry automatically gets jumped to the top of the queue. We want to deal with emergencies as if they were emergencies. We don't want to, route people who are in a full triage mode and have them wait 2 to 3 hours for a response back. So people who select any one of those 3 options automatically jump to the top of the queue. Now you would probably say, oh, does that affect people kind of gaming the system? Do they select those options anyway, even though they're not worried or panicked or angry? And I can say that in the several years that we have done this, nobody has selected those options with the intent to game the system, or not that we have noticed anyway. So when we're talking about being empathetic, how do you bring this home to your library? The Harvard Business Review has a really wonderful article. And by the way, at the end of my presentation, there is a list of all of the books and articles that I have suggested with full citations. So you'll be able to see those and get them and read on if you would like to. So the Harvard Business Review has a really wonderful article about journey mapping. And what journey mapping is it asks you to pick a process or an outcome that users must undertake to accomplish a task. For example, if I was a patron and I wanted to email the library, what steps would I have to undergo to find the library's email address and send them an email? And when you actually map out the journey that a patron must take to accomplish a task, you will identify pain points. And addressing those pain points will help you to feel more empathetic to your users and therefore provide, thinking about their experience in the customer service process. Another great way is to ask them via focus groups. You're lucky in the sense that you have physical locations and you get to see your patrons' face when they come up to the desk or they're walking around the library and they look scared or angry or panicked. So you don't have to ask them a question on a form like, how are you feeling, although you're welcome to do that as well. But asking them by, creating small focus groups is a great way to understand how they're feeling and to develop empathy for them. And one of the things that I always like to talk about is ask, when was the last time you used your own library as a user? It's really easy to kind of put on the librarian hat and say, well, all of these things should make sense to the user. But when you're utilizing the library as a patron, it's really hard to wear both hats at the same time. So let me give you a bit of background to that. I already had my master's in library sciences, so I was already a librarian, and I decided to go back and finish my master's from the University of Auckland. And I just had a little bit left. I had to write my huge 150-page thesis with original research. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is going to be so easy because I'm a librarian. So doing my thesis and doing the lit review is going to be easy peasy. Well, let me tell you, actually being a graduate student and having my MLS under my belt and being a librarian, it did not help me at all. Or not enough that I would have cakewalked through my lit review for my thesis. So I always like to challenge people to utilize the library as a user, and it will really help you to identify with them and be empathetic towards them. My fourth principle is to start a dialogue, also from Danny Meyer's Setting the Table. You're going to see a lot more quotes from him. So Danny says that service is a monologue where you decide how you want to do things. Hospitality is a dialogue. This requires listening to that person and following up with a thoughtful and gracious response. So how do we do this? How do we start a dialogue at Springshare with our users? So the first thing is that we all have SDD. Now that is not something you need a shot of penicillin for, I promise. It stands for Support Driven Development. Basically, 90% or more of all feature requests come from our users. And this is because everybody in the entire company does support. No single person, all the way up to our chief Springy himself, is divorced from the process or even more than one iteration away from the user directly. Now, because everybody has to do support in some method or manner, everybody's always actively listening. So we don't need to necessarily predict what our community needs. They're telling us, and we are very lucky and fortunate that we actually have a very strong and vocal community. Now, part of getting this feedback and active listening means that you need to take care to close the feedback loop. If people are reaching out to share their ideas for what they want, it is important to respond and reciprocate that by closing the feedback loop. And what that shows is that you value them as stakeholders in their space. What I always tell myself almost every day is that this is their LibGuides. This is not our LibGuides. This is their LibGuides. This is their space, and we are valuing them as stakeholders in their space. Closing the feedback loop can range from anything to sending personal emails or even multimodal reach. Now, to give you a little bit of background on that, it used to be, just a few years ago, every time a feature request came in, and if we coded it up, we would send a personal email to everyone who had suggested that feature request, letting them know that A, it was available, B, how to use it, and C, thanking them for their feedback. So we actually sent personal emails to every single person. Unfortunately, we're approaching almost 90,000 users of LibGuides, so it's not so easy for us to personally thank every single person who sends us a feature request. So now we use more of a multimodal reach where we write blog posts, we put it out on social media. And yes, if you have a question for me as Jamie's writing, you can type it into the question box, and I am monitoring both the question and the chat as well. So bottom line, having a support-driven development process creates accountability to each other and to the user, to our patrons, to our clients. So some recommended tips for you to start a dialogue. Think about active listening. One of my favorite phrases that Slavin always says that I try to say to myself every day is, ask them what they want, we'll see what we can do. We hardly ever like saying the word no, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later, but that's my favorite phrase. Ask them what they need or what they want, and we'll see what we can do. Take care to close the feedback loop. I strongly recommend that you get a system in place to handle patron feedback. I used to work at an academic library, and we had a box that was at the reference desk where people could put little slips of paper. And I wish I could go get in a time machine and go back in time with what I know now, because I never did anything. Nobody ever did anything with that piece of paper. Truthfully, I don't even know who read it. I don't know what ever came of it. If I had known then what I know now, we would have had staff meetings every week where everybody read and listened to the feedback that went into the feedback box. We would have done blog posts about the feedback and letting people know whether we were or weren't going to implement any suggestions. So if I could only go ahead and get into my time machine, I would do that. So my tip for you is take care to close the feedback loop, and remember that they're stakeholders in their space. So if they care enough to ask for something, it's always good to care enough to respond. As I mentioned, we use our own LibAnswers tool to do this, and every time an email comes in that requires any kind of review, we tag it with review. So then we can go back and say, show me all of the requests that have come in tagged for review, and then we can follow up as appropriate. And consider multimodal reach. Remember, not everybody comes to you, so think about using blogs and websites and social media. There's always ways to get better to push that info out into all of the various spaces that they are and where you are. This is my fifth principle for putting UX into customer service, and this is being on the offense. The best defense is a good offense. I tried very hard to find out where this quote can be attributed to or from, and could not find it. So we'll just say age-old adage. So what do I mean by being on the offense? So for us, at Springshare, social media is very important, especially from the fact that we're a virtual company. So the best way for us to be on the offense is to have active watches on specific keywords. So we're actively listening and always on the ready to start a dialogue. You'll notice that these principles are starting to overlap now. So for example, here's a tweet that came out on April 7th, and it was saying, bringing my coworkers up to speed on our new LibGuides layout this week, #LibraryLife. Now, this person did not tweet to us. They were not tweeting, asking us a question, but because I have an active keyword watch on anybody that tweets about LibGuides or LibAnswers or LibCal, I was able to see this tweet. And so I replied back and said, hey, have fun with LibGuides. Let us know if you need anything. And that exchange actually led to several questions that they, in fact, did have questions, and so they walked away happy because they didn't even have to ask. We were already on the offense, already keeping an eye out on what people might be thinking, and always ready to start a dialogue and to jump in. Here's another tweet that came out not too long ago. So this was a tweet where somebody wrote, hey, LibGuides. Why, not hey LibGuides, just LibGuides, why do you haunt me? Why can't you be more user-friendly? #LibGuides, #librarian problems. So we saw this tweet, I saw this tweet, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna jump in. So we jumped in, I tweeted back to this person, oh no, how can we help? We're always open to feedback, criticism included, so we'd love to hear your comments. I escalated this all the way up to our chief Springy, Slavin himself, and he asked me to communicate over Twitter that he should email her directly. I'm sorry, she should email him directly with her questions because he, as the chief and CEO, chief operator, he was most interested in their feedback and criticism. We kept asking this person over Twitter, hey, had you emailed us? Hey, had you emailed us? Hey, we're waiting to hear from you. So a day later or the next day or even a couple days after that, we got this reply from them. I'll be honest, I was quite shocked when I had a tweet response yesterday. You were all super quick with responding, which I had no idea you would do in the first place. I was just venting. Who knew people listened? Thank you so much for being responsive and involved. It is truly a mark of a great company. So this person didn't, in fact, have any feedback. They were just on Twitter. Maybe they were having an off day. We jumped in and let them know that we were willing to listen to their complaints, including honest criticism, and we were going to do our best to make things right. And they were very, very, very happy with the outcome. Another way to be on the offense is that we send direct messages or DMs to every single person who follows us. So shameless plug, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow us at Springshare, and you will get a personal direct message back thanking you for following us. And the reason being is that they have, users have unlimited options. They have so much noise coming at them. There are literally millions of Twitter accounts they could be following. And instead of following those other ones, they have chosen to add you, your Twitter account, to their channel. Thereby reducing the fact that they could follow other people, because one can only follow so many, mentally and be able to keep up with all of it. So you're acknowledging that. You're acknowledging that opportunity cost that they have spent in order to follow you instead of somebody else. And sending a direct message back is like sending them a personal thank you card. If you are on social media already, great. If you are and you're not, I strongly encourage you to utilize a social media management tool to help you to be on the offense. Here's an example of some of them. There's Sprout Social, Hootsuite. The one in the middle is TweetDeck. All of them are great. Some of them are free. Some of them are subscription-based. Pick your favorite. They all work very, very well. Now, if you are on social media already or you're not, I strongly encourage you to come up with a social media mission statement and guidelines. It does not need to be a manual or a book. Ours is literally a half a page long, and here are just some of the principles that are in our social media mission statement and policies. So if somebody writes to us, 100% always take the time to write back. Any person who tweets to us or tweets at Springshare or at LibGuides, they always get a reply back. Never, ever, ever fight fire with fire. Social media, for better or for worse, is a place for people to kvetch and to troll, and it's going to happen. And you might be the subject of that kvetching or that trolling. And if you get involved, you are just going to get in the middle of a mud fight or a knife fight, and you're the only one that's going to come out looking hurt. As Taylor Swift would say, as Tay would say, haters going to hate, and you just got to shake it off. So never fight fire with fire. If you do notice an interaction occurring or several interactions occurring, try not to interfere or jump in unless they're mistaken. So if somebody is blatantly perpetrating a myth about the library or about your services, you can jump in a professional capacity and clarify or adjust that mistake. And if you are going to jump in for any other reason to a conversation or into somebody's own personal tweet, never jump in, never communicate unless you're going to bring value. So that's one thing that you kind of have to say to yourself is, am I jumping in to defend myself or the library, or am I jumping in because I have something of value to bring? And to kind of give you an example, there was a conversation going on Twitter where people were talking about customizing LibGuides. And they were saying, some were saying it was really easy, some people were saying it was really hard, and I'm watching the communication going on, and the only time we at Springshare jumped in is when I jumped in and said, hey, for those of you who are interested about customizing LibGuides, here's a link to our help guide on it. So I jumped in and I brought value, I brought helpful information, and then I jumped out of the conversation. Try to avoid self-promotion. The tweets that we have noticed and the Facebook posts that we have noticed that have gotten the most shares and the most likes are the ones where we're highlighting the work of others. It's really easy on social media to just use it as a broadcasting tool, talking about yourself. You know, here are the things that we are doing. Here are the new services that we have. Here's the new resources that we've bought. But it ends up being just an advertising campaign all the time about yourself or about your organization. Think about it as the more love that you distribute, the more you're going to get back. The rule of reciprocity. So avoid self-promotion. Try and highlight the works of others as much as you can. Now, some recommended tips for being on the offense. Engage users in the library. One of the methods that I particularly love is the Pottery Barn method. So for those of you who have ever been in Pottery Barn or Crate and Barrel, I believe they're sister stores, it's the rule of 3. So when you walk in the store, within the first minute, you have to be greeted and welcomed. So welcome, thank you for coming into Pottery Barn, have a great day. Within a certain amount of time, someone has to approach you and ask you, do you need help? Are you finding everything? Is there something specific that you're looking for? And then upon exiting, you are thanked for visiting the Pottery Barn. So thank you so much for visiting Pottery Barn. We hope to see you again sometime. So the rule of 3, the welcome, the question, and the thank you. So as a tip for you for being on the offense, engaging users in the library. Do you need help? I see you wandering the stacks. Can I help you find anything? Thank you for visiting the library. We hope to see you again soon. If that approach sounds a little bit intimidating, I strongly recommend the bottom-up approach. So involving, if you're at an academic, involving students to do peer-to-peer engagement is great. Or if you have volunteers or pages, that's another great way for them to interact with the community. And I strongly recommend getting on social and having a strategic plan. My 6th principle has to do with building communities. So once again, another quote from Danny Meyer. You really should read this book. If there's one thing that you read about the user experience, read this book. So Danny Meyer says, building communities, take a genuine interest in other human beings and allow them to share their story. This creates a sense of daily community that feeds into the overall larger community. So there's a company that has been really excellent, and they've excelled at this concept of building communities, and that's Starbucks. Their entire brand is not coffee, because they don't actually have the best coffee. There are lots of reports and taste tests and feedback and people blogging about it and tweeting about it and saying that. In fact, Starbucks does not have the best coffee. They do have an excellent way of building these daily communities, these micro communities where people come and they feel like it's their coffee shop, even though their coffee shop is part of a huge international chain of coffee shops. It doesn't take away from the fact that that coffee shop feels like theirs coffee shop that feeds into their overall larger feeling of community. So how do you build communities? A great way to build communities is to create meaningful relationships. This email was sent out by our chief Springy, Slavin himself. He sent it out on October 5th, 2012. And you can read the whole email, but I'll just read the highlighted section. And he basically says, as a challenge to all of us at Springshare, to send a couple of personal notes to a few different clients every week as a way to build and foster long-term relationships with community members. Sending a personal note like, hi, how are you? How are things going? I see you sent in an email. Just wanted to touch base and see how you're doing. So creating meaningful relationships. So here's an email that I sent over the summer to one of our clients. I saw on Facebook that their father had had a stroke, so I sent a personal email and I said, I heard your dad had a stroke. Please let me know how he's doing. Let me know if there's anything that I can help you with. I'm here for you. So this was the response that I got back. And by the way, my nickname is Talls, and people frequently call me Talls, both internally as well as externally. So you're all welcome to call me Talls as well. So this particular customer wrote back and said, you are the sweetest ever, Talls. Yes, my poor dad had a stroke, but now I can say that things could have not been worse. Things could have been a lot worse, I'm sorry. He is now out of the hospital, installed at Kessler Rehab, getting the therapy he needs. And then I love this ending, much love and gratitude for your friendship. And why is this an email to share with you? Well, because this particular client, this particular customer feels as though, and rightfully so, that they are part of our family, that we are a family here at Springshare, and that they are a part of that. They are a part of our community and our family. It's that feeling like when you walk into a Trader Joe's and everybody who's working there seems to be having a great time. They're all walking down the aisles and yelling, all hands on deck, and ringing bells and tossing cookies to each other. And it feels like you're walking into the middle of a dinner party and everybody looks at you and says, hey, thanks for joining our party. Come on in. That feeling of enveloping and welcoming, that you are part of something, that's how you a great way to build a community. Kind of that Starbucks feeling as well. So here's a tip for you, and this is a really simple tip as a way to build a daily community that fosters into the larger community. Is I challenge everybody to take 10 minutes every day and reach out to 3 people. If you were to do that for 1 year, including weekends, and I even factored in some vacation time, you would have reached out with 780 people. These are people that you can create a sense of affiliation with and a sense of community with. Now times that by 10 people in your library, that's 7,800 people that you could have reached out in a single year. My 7th principle is about humor, and humor is powerful. This is a quote from Jerry Seinfeld. And Jerry says, nobody cares who it comes from or where it's coming from, but if somebody comes along and they're really funny, it's always welcome. So one of the things we try and do here at Springshare is we want to make people smile just for a little bit in their day. So a couple of years ago, we did a April Fool's joke where we launched a new product at Springshare called Lib Stapler. And it was the smart stapler for libraries. The stapler not only provided staples, but all great features, statistics, RFID, and it even had an automatic locking feature. So if that patron came about who likes to staple 30 pages together, it would automatically lock down. And we made a website dedicated just for it. We posted it on social media, and it kind of went a little bit crazy, and it was retweeted and favorited. And you can Google it right now, libstapler, and you can still find our webpage and check out our funny pictures. They're pretty great. And we took a while to plan this. It was a planned, bit of a company-wide effort to get this off the ground. We also used to do, and I keep saying to myself I need to bring this back, but if you all remember Deep Thoughts by Jack Handey from the SNL, we did a Springy Thoughts, and so some of the ones we thought of was one thing children of librarians have to be taught early on is to locate a bathroom without having to ask, #SpringyThoughts. Now you'll notice that these tweets, and they're not promoting anything, they're not self-promotion, they're not advocating a new tool, a new product, a new service. They're just funny things that we thought they were funny as a way to encourage people to laugh. So here are some recommended tips for you. Humor is a great way to create a connection, which can create customer intimacy. Customer intimacy fosters and builds apostles, and apostles spread your word. So once again, using humor as a way to connect and build those daily communities and those relationships. Customer intimacy is one of the least expensive options. It's not about building a new building or buying all new furniture or adding a new coffee shop into the library. It's one of the least expensive ways to promote your brand, and it has the strongest reward. One of the things that I see a lot of is I see patrons trying to joke with their libraries, and the libraries not taking their lead. So my tip for you is to pick up what they're throwing down. So here's an example. Not too long ago on Twitter, I saw a library that had installed these new things called safety pods. I thought that they were like safe, like you go in and you hit a button and you get locked in, so that way if you feel like you're under physical attack, you would be safe, but not. They're actually research pods, so that way if you were doing research on a material that might be sensitive or people might judge you based on it, you could do the research in these safety pods away from the prying eyes of users. And they were promoting it on Twitter, these really cool new safety pods. Well, one of their patrons tweeted to them and said, "Safety pods, does this mean, that anytime I'm feeling threatened, I can jump into a safety pod and be, whisked away to safety?" They were obviously joking. I don't remember the exact exchange, but it was a very tongue-in-cheek response. And the library could have jumped in and been really funny. They could have been like, "Walk, don't run to your nearest safety pod. The pods are coming for you." They could have done something funny, but they didn't. They instead said something like, "If you are feeling unsafe in our library, please approach the security desk and we will take down an official record to ensure that you are not unsafe or feeling unsafe in our library. We take safety very seriously." And of course, the patron never responded back. It was a missed opportunity to pick up what they were throwing down. Don't be afraid to strategize moments of humor. Comedians practice, Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld, they don't get up on stage and just whiff it or riff it. They practice their bits for years and years and months and daily. So don't be afraid to strategize moments of humor. And we're lucky, April Fool's Day comes the same day every year. And there's always International Talk Like a Pirate Day. Tomorrow is International Corduroy Day, or National Corduroy Day is tomorrow. So don't be afraid to strategize moments of humor. And probably the biggest tip is to read the room. That's why it's really important why we have that "how are you feeling" question on our forum, because we're not going to use a joke in our communication if somebody's in a panicky state. So one of the fails that we learned from this read the room was we used to have 403 error messages. Like if somebody tried to do something in LibGuides and it didn't work, we would have this fail whale error message. If you're familiar with Twitter, it's a fail whale. And we thought it was really funny until we sat down and we thought about it, and we said, you know, people are probably pretty irritated with that message. They're trying to do something. It doesn't work. And then it's like, ha ha, we're like laughing at them almost in a way. So we should probably not do that anymore. So a great way to kind of think about this is, you know, read the room. Humor is only like powerful when it is utilized properly. And my last principle for being, for thinking about the user experience in your customer service is to be a good human. This is actually a modified principle. The principle that is put out by uxmatters.com is called be human, and I've changed it and I've added the modifier with a good. And that means to be approachable, be trustworthy, and be transparent. So how are we at Springshare trying to be a good human? We say no to saying no. So we try as much as we can to remove the word no from our vocabulary when people write to us. And the best part about avoiding the word no, like if you were to take that out of your vocabulary and you said, well, I can't say no, so what else can I do? Is it really opens your brain up to creative problem solving. It's like Sudoku, you know, times 1,000. So if you can't say no, think about all of the different brainstorming that you'll have to come to kind of get a satisfactory answer. And what I always tell people is that even if you can't get the patron, the client, 100% of the way there, 10% or even 1% is still better than a no. A no is like a door that is being shut in somebody's face. It's basically a 0%, a zero-sum game. And I always say there's almost always a workaround. And even if the workaround is only 1% of what they want, it's still better than no percent. Another part about being a good human is about being speedy. So this is an email that was sent out from a client several years ago, and they wrote, okay, only 7 minutes went by between my sending the email and receiving yours. The customer service at Springshare is so awesome, it borders on creepy. Speed equals consideration. It shows that you care. And if you need more time, it's okay to need more time, just to respond that you will respond. Sometimes people send in questions that I need a day or two or even a week, but I always try to respond as quickly as possible. And I say, hey, I got your email, I got your question, I will get back to you as soon as I can, but do know that I have heard you. And the best kind of example of this is that you probably have all seen that Allstate commercial that's been going on. It was really popular over the summer or even earlier in the year. It's the little kids, they're on their cell phone and they're trying to report their car accident claim, and they keep hearing this automated message that says, you are very important to us. We value you as clients. Your hold time is 4 hours and 50 minutes. And the little girl takes the phone and she smashes it into the ground, because you can't tell somebody that they're valued and they're important and then tell them that it's going to take you 5 hours or 8 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks to get back to them. They don't feel like they're being valued. They don't feel like you are empathizing with them or that you are placing yourself in their shoes. And they don't feel like their needs are being considerate. So while I will not tell you to be creepy in this particular sense, I will tell you to kind of exceed expectations. Another way of being a good human, and some of the things that we do here at Springshare, is that everybody makes mistakes. I've probably made about 20 in this presentation so far. Everybody makes mistakes, but there are 5 recommended ways by Danny Meyer to address those mistakes. So Danny Meyer says to be aware of the mistake, to acknowledge the mistake, to apologize for the mistake, take action to fix it, and provide additional generosity. When acknowledging a mistake, it's very easy to be on the defensive. You know, somebody's angry, they're upset, it is your fault, and they are attacking you. And it's very easy to get defensive of it. And I try to remind people to not get defensive, to sit there, to actively listen, to acknowledge their feelings and empathize with them. That is one of the best ways to handle angry people. And libraries in particular have great great resources to provide additional generosity. To kind of give you an example of this, when I was at CIL, the presentation that Jamie mentioned, my coworker and I went out to dinner, went to this amazing restaurant in DC. We're sitting there having dinner, wonderful meal, great service. End of the meal, the waiter dumps an entire milkshake on my coworker's pants. It wasn't even our milkshake, to add insult to injury. It was for another table. So the whole milkshake landed on my coworker's pants, his only pair of jeans for the whole time we were there, which then went all the way into his sneakers and his socks. So his one pair of shoes were also ruined with this milkshake. And of course, he got very upset. He gets up, he walks around. The management comes over. They were aware of the mistake. They acknowledged the mistake. They profusely apologized. They cleaned up the entire table. They gave us a new table, a new tablecloth. They offered to dry clean the clothes, dry clean the shoes. And what I really liked is at the end of the meal, when we asked for the bill, they said there's no bill. The entire meal has been copped. So that was the additional generosity there. Now, we could have walked away from that restaurant and said, we're never going to go back there again. Oh, my God, worst experience ever. But we didn't. We were like, we're going to come back the next time we're here. That was incredible. Now, for a restaurant to have made such a big mistake as that and still get repeat business is a testament to how aware they were of the user experience in that customer service exchange. Now, libraries are in a unique area when it comes to additional generosity. Giving somebody a couple of free photocopies, extending their renewal on an item, waiving a few cents of their fine if you can, giving them a little bit of extra time on the computer is a great way to provide additional generosity and have them walking away feeling like their mistake was not only handled, but they walk away feeling really, really good about the library. It's a good way to be a good human. If you have a patron whisperer, there's always somebody in your team, in your library who's really good at diffusing angry people. Use them. I always say use your team. You might not be the best person to handle an angry person, and that's okay. Not everybody has to be great at everything. But remembering that you're a team, that you're a family, that you're here to work together to provide the best service for the patron as a way to make them happy. So use your team if you have somebody who's available to do that. Now, I would poll the audience, but I don't know if I can see your questions. Does anybody know what this picture is?
If you know what it is, you can respond in your chat box or your question box. Does anyone know?
We'll do a little Jeopardy music. Okay, so I will just say it's a photo of the Boston bombing. If those of you are
someone just said that. Yep.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it is a picture of the Boston bombing. So let me explain to you a little bit of backdrop of this. Boston Public Library is one of Springshare's users. They have a LibGuide system. They actually have some great LibGuides. You should check them out. And when we heard about the bombing at the marathon, we were very concerned. Everybody at Springshare, we were glued to the news, as you were probably as well. And if you remember that day, there were some mixed reports that day that went out. Basically, some people reported that a bomb had also gone off in the Boston Public Library. Turns out it wasn't a bomb, it was a fire, and it didn't happen that day. It happened a few days prior. So there was some mixed media reporting about what was happening. So, of course, we were all very concerned. We thought that a bomb had gone off in Boston Public Library. So we, one of my coworkers, Gina, was calling everybody she knew at the Boston Public Library, calling and sending emails and saying, hey, oh my gosh, I hope everybody's okay. We heard a bomb went off. Please, let us know. And the funniest, well, funny, not funny for this, but a funny thing happened shortly thereafter. So yes, she received an email response back, everybody saying everybody was fine, thanking her for her concern. Shortly after was the ALA annual conference, if you remember. And one of the people from Boston Public Library, we were there, we were at the ALA annual conference, we have a booth there. They found us in the exhibit hall. They came right towards us like a beeline. They asked for Gina, they found Gina, and they jumped on her like a spider monkey would jump on a person. They wrapped both their legs around Gina. And by the way, Gina's 4 feet 10 inches tall. So it was an impressive feat. So they jumped on her like a spider monkey, hugging her and saying to her and to everybody in the entire vicinity that of all of the vendors that Boston Public Library deals with, they're one of the largest libraries in the entire country. We were the only vendor that called them to see how they were doing. So part of being a good human is to show your soul and to remember that service without a soul is utterly forgettable, as Danny Meyer would say. So here's some recommended tips for being a good human. Try to avoid saying no. There's always a way, and think of it as an opportunity for creative thinking, Sudoku for the brain. Come up with a turnaround time threshold and hold staffers accountable to that. Remember that being speedy equals consideration and showing that you care for your users. Admit mistakes and make it right whenever you can. And to show your soul, many of you see the same patrons on a day-to-day basis, and you can probably read it right on their face if they're going through a hard time or they're homesick. And a great way to really, be empathetic and to put themselves in your shoes, yourself in their shoes, is to kind of show your soul. So those are my 8 Springshare customer service principles. Be strategic, be empathetic, start a dialogue, go the extra mile, be on the offense. Originally I had that as be offensive. That didn't quite come off the way that I wanted it to come off, so we went with be on the offense. Build communities, use humor. Humor is powerful, and be a good human. So I have about 5 to 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Talia. As Talia mentioned, she does have a few minutes for questions. If anyone has any, you are free to type those in the chat box. And her email is there, too, if you think of anything when our program is done today. Talia, one thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned toward the end how we should involve our team members, possibly to deal with angry people and how we don't have to be good at everything. But we often... I think a lot of times, we come across training or this notion that, if we're working, the front line of a library, that we have to be able to deal with angry people. We have to handle, this sort of thing. So how do we sort of combat both of those ideas?
That's a great question, Jamie. So remember, every opportunity is an opportunity for learning, which is one of the reasons I love the shared daily kudos, is that it's always a teaching moment. So I think it can be both. I think that if you have somebody who just happens to be a patron whisperer, who's really good at calming down people, it's a great way to utilize them and then also learn from them. And then maybe with time, you'll also be the patron whisperer, having kind of learned from them and also teaching others that are new to your library or other people as well. So I think it can be a mix of both. Here at Springshare, I try my best always to answer the question, but if it's beyond my ability to make this person happy, if they are just so angry to the point where nothing I'm saying is getting through to them, then perhaps I am not the best person either. And it's not about taking it personally, like I can't fix this person's anger. So sometimes just handing them off to somebody else who can answer them, it's less about ego and more about answering this particular situation, answering this patron's problem. And I might not be the best person to do that, and that's okay. I can learn from somebody else, or somebody else might hand somebody to me because they're not the best person to satisfy that anger issue either. So remembering that you're part of a team and that you're part of a community, and where you might be called on to step up and take the lead, or you might pass it off to somebody else for them to take the lead, knowing that you don't have to do it alone.
Do you think something like customer service, we hear about it a lot, not just in libraries, but everywhere. Do you think, I tend to think of it as a soft skill. Do you think it's something that people can learn? Some people are just not nice. I hate to say it, but they're not, we know that, we've met these people, we've encountered them at other places. So how do, how do we teach that, or how do we assist some of them in being nicer, or being a better human, I guess?
That's a great question. So earlier, if you recall, I mentioned the high HQ, the high hospitality quotient.
Yes.
If you think of HQ like IQ is not something that people are taught to have. It's kind of an innate ability. People are born with high IQ, and people can be born or have as part of their personality high HQ. To say that only people who have high HQs are great at customer service and people who don't have a high HQ are not great, I don't think that you can say that. That's like saying only smart people have high IQs and people who don't have high IQs therefore are not smart. So I think it's a mix of both a learned skill and also having a natural predilection to providing great customer service, being a personable person. So while I will say that not everybody at Springshare has a high HQ, there is a trend, especially with people on the support team, almost like we've sought out people that we knew would be great on the front lines, kind of thing. Be great at being under kind of attack, so to speak.
I was at a conference last month, and it was at a kind of a similar session, and the speaker said, if at the very least, if you can't smile at somebody, at the very least, try not to frown. So maybe for some people like that, it's just maybe you're not going to go the extra mile and be as friendly as other people, but maybe for that person, it's just getting them to not frown or to look like they're frowning. I think we have to take small steps with everyone.
Exactly. And, people sometimes mistake a peppy, upbeat, personable personality with good customer service. And I can definitely tell you that when I was working at a library, some people, when they came to the desk with a question, they didn't want to be with a, "Hi, how are you? How's everything? How can I help you?"
Right.
They wanted a more toned down, less cheerleadery style of customer service. So it's not a one-size-fits-all customer
Correct.
service, and like this one personality will always provide great customer service, because some people cannot stand that peppy kind of personality, and other people don't want to see somebody just sitting there with a frown. So I guess it's just about adapting I guess that's actually my tip. My best tip for providing really great and thinking about the user is adapting your customer service strategy to their needs. So if somebody comes to the desk with a frown on their face, talking quietly, not super enthusiastic, I'm going to tone down my cheerleaderness a lot. And if somebody comes up and they're like, "Hey, how are you? I love the library," I'm going to be like, "Rah, rah, where are my pom-poms?"
Exactly.
So the best kind of approach is going to be the approach that best suits them.
That's great.
And it might not be a smile. Exactly.
Well, we are just about out of time. I want to thank you so much, Talia, for giving this presentation and for taking the time to do it. I know you have a plane to catch soon, so we're gonna close and let you go. And for those of you still listening in, I will be sending you the email follow-up tomorrow, and it will have a copy of the slides as well as this presentation. So if you do want to go back and listen, you are able to do that. So thank you all for listening in today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And again, thank you to Talia for the excellent presentation. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. So long.
Thanks, Jamie. Bye, everybody.